Hello, Rick Wilson.
Molly Jong-Fast, great to be back with you.
You had a nice little vacation.
We did. We went to England, and Renee and I spent a few days in the Cotswolds and a few days in London. When I was over there, their number one story in the news for like 4 or 5 days was that the deputy prime minister had not paid enough property taxes. It wasn't, did Trump nuke the moon? It wasn't something cuckoo.
There's still time. While you were away, Stephen Miller went on Fox News, and he said some stuff. We're gonna cut to the
Let's
video
roll that.
tape
I
here.
know what you're talking about.
There is a domestic terrorism movement in this country. When you see these organized doxing campaigns where the left calls people enemies of the republic, calls them fascists, says they're Nazis, says they're evil, says they have to be removed, and then prints their addresses, what do you think they're trying to do? They are trying to inspire someone to murder them. That is their objective. That is their intent. And when you see online, Sean, as we've seen for the last few days, tape after tape after tape of federal workers, bureaucrats, staffers in the Pentagon, educators, professors, healthcare workers, nurses, celebrating the assassination of Charlie Kirk. These are radicalized people. There is a domestic terrorism movement in this country.
I just want to say, you think that the cardigan is going to make him seem a little more mellow, but I guess it's a fleece. Like, you want to like a guy in a gray fleece.
Look, I mean, it is the sort of modern day business bro uniform. You want a quarter zip or a fleece, and it makes you seem like you're casual and yet still smart and sharp and approachable and yet not necessarily rabid, bouncing off the fucking walls. And Stephen Miller, there's a real tell in all of this. Stephen Miller immediately goes to it. Oh, they call us Nazis. They call us fascists. Well, listen, Stephen, if the jackboot fits, wear it.
Well, I don't think that. I think that I think the name calling, whatever, right? Nobody has ever been convinced of anything by calling someone a name. The question I have is, where are these nurses? Where are these federal employees celebrating this brutal killing? Because I have not seen that. Now, maybe I'm siloed up, but I've not seen federal employees.
You know what I did see a few weeks ago?
What?
Mike Lee and J.D. Vance and a whole bunch of other Republicans laughing and joking about the murder of the former House Speaker in Minnesota. You know what I did see when Paul Pelosi was beaten with a hammer by a crazy guy who was inspired by MAGA? I saw Don Jr. making jokes about it online. I thought it was hilarious. And frankly, we saw Charlie Kirk hoping that guy would get bailed out at the time. So
let's just pull back, because Stephen Miller is basically Trump's chief of staff. So this is not like some guy on the internet saying this. This is the president's chief of staff.
Molly, it's important to realize not only that, Stephen Miller is the effective head of both the Justice Department and the Department of Homeland Security.
Right. He
controls those things top to bottom.
And one of the things that I think has been really interesting about this week that we've seen a lot of is that we've seen people from Trump world and how there's, like, I'm thinking about Kash Patel. So Kash Patel was so worried about the way that this was playing out in the media, social, mainstream. And we have now Stephen Miller going on television, going on Fox News, saying, that he's going to sort of the goal, what it sounds like to me here, and I certainly could be wrong, but it sounds like ideological culling of the federal government.
Look, I think you have to expand past that. You have people like Representative Clay Higgins. You have people across the MAGA-verse now saying that anybody who doesn't sufficiently praise Charlie Kirk is going to be targeted. And I think what you see Miller doing is taking a tragic moment, a horrible moment of violence, and now trying to weaponize it into a further expansion of the power of the executive branch.
Right.
When you have,
Which is
when
the
you have
unitary
the State Department,
executive theory.
yes, when you have the State Department now saying that they want to be able to cancel Americans' passports if they say the wrong things. This is an increasingly dark vision.
Censorship.
Yeah, it's not just censorship. It's the use of the power of the state,
to
harm the political opponents of the president.
It's funny because my grandfather, after he got out of jail
Right.
during the McCarthy era, they actually did take away his passport. And that's why the family went to Mexico after he got out of jail, because you could go to Mexico without a passport. And they actually went to a very conservative Supreme Court and were given their passports back
Right.
because the court said you can't take people's passports away for political reasons. Now, that was 75 years ago. Now, our court is significantly more conservative than it was 75 years ago. I feel like this court, you give them that question, they might decide differently.
There was an article in the Times on Sunday about the number of times the Supreme Court agrees with the administration, and the current Supreme Court, no Supreme Court in history has ever agreed with an administration more frequently than this one does. So,
Yeah.
Donald Trump could say, my opponents have to be branded in the middle of their forehead with an L for loser, and they would probably go, well, the executive power should not be constrained. And look, Molly, I think what we're seeing here, these are the kind of things that really show us who this administration is. And Stephen Miller, by saying that he wants to enforce a speech code in this country and enforce ideological conformity, and to try to use this tragedy to pin it on everyone who speaks against the president. It does show you also something, that clip in particular, that Stephen Miller's crazy. This guy has more than a couple of bolts loose up top. I wonder, in some ways, the president looks at Miller and says, he's the guy who understands my base. I wonder in some ways, just like with RFK, if we're going to start reaching a point of diminishing returns with Stephen Miller soon, because that stuff he's doing on TV is cuckoo town.
Well, again, I think it's also a question of, is it more trouble than it's worth? And that goes to Chicago. And I'd love to talk about Chicago because
Sure.
Trump was all ready to go into Chicago last week and he changed his mind.
Right.
That is when Trump says uncle about things, that is really important to
it means
highlight.
a lot. When Trump tacos, it means a lot. And especially because he really had spent in the period before the Kirk incident, he had spent about a week saying Chicago was weak and dangerous and the streets were running with blood and all this other stuff. And and people like Miller had been out talking to reporters, telling them, we're going to go in, we're going to take the city back. If they screw with us, we'll arrest them. And then he backed off. And now we're hearing that he was going to send troops to Memphis, which needs it. Red state, blue city, red state, and to Louisiana, which also red state, blue cities.
But again, needs it is a fake framing, right? Needs it.
You know what? You're correct. Molly, I stand corrected. Corrected. You could make a better case for it in those communities.
But you still should not make any case that the National Guard should be fighting crime, because that's not their job. And also,
it's not what they're doing in D.C. They're picking up trash.
Right. They're picking up trash. They're planting things. And by the way, they are furious, right? National Guard troops are really mad because these people signed up to save drowning children and fight wars, not to pick up trash and intimidate their neighbors, which is not the purpose. But I think it's worth just for another minute talking about why Trump did not go into Chicago, because Pritzker certainly has something to do with it. He went into California, that was ruled illegal. And then I also wonder about Brandon Johnson. There was a really united front there.
Yeah, I think he started to look at Chicago, and there was a possibility there that the Chicago government and courts and law enforcement would all say, no, not here, bro. And he has been losing in court a lot, as you know. And I think that there may have been part of this that said, we don't want to have a precedent set, because look, in Tennessee and Louisiana, the state governments are going to say, cool, we love Mr. Trump.
Whatever. Right.
But in Illinois, I think there was a real chance he could have been legally and professionally embarrassed by this, in terms of the city might have been able to really, put up some meaningful obstacles, both legally and otherwise, to this kind of behavior. So I think the window in which Trump can use the National Guard is closing or has closed. I don't think it's an effective strategy. There is pushback inside the military about it, quietly, of course, because they're all afraid of Trump.
And
But
it was emailed to a reporter at the Washington Post that this was terrible for
yeah,
them
this
and that
was
they were
a bad look,
suffering.
and killing morale in the Guard.
Yeah. Which, I mean, the thing that is so interesting about this administration is like at so many points, so they blew up this boat off the coast. It certainly seems like the boat they blew up, they don't have a definitive answer on what was in it,
Does it
right?
strike you that the boat they blew up might not have really been a drug
Well,
smuggle?
they were turning around. You saw
Right.
that, right? They got,
Oh, yeah.
they were, when people are in the midst of surrendering, you're not supposed to kill them, right?
That is the rule. That is part of the, Uniform Code of Military Justice, and also the Geneva Convention, a variety of other practices of war, where if
Right.
someone says, "Hey, okay, I give up," you're not supposed to just kill them. And look, I think what you're seeing also, and there's a little bit of reporting about this, you've got Rick Grenell and Marco Rubio fighting over control of who's gonna be the Venezuela person. It's an odd fight, and one that I will never see on pay-per-view, I presume, but it
Right.
really strikes me that, one side is leaking like a sieve, and it doesn't seem like it's Rubio's side who was controlling
Right.
this until that moment, and I wonder what the value added is for the Trump administration to declare war on Venezuela and to pretend that they're stopping Trinidad by blowing up shrimp boats.
Yes. But then there's
It's
also
just
the larger
it's kind of a
question.
lot.
I feel like so much news got drowned out by
Uh-huh.
this other stuff, but, like, Scott Bessent
What the
has
fuck with White House
it
Fight Club?
is yes, White House Fight Club. Scott Bessent has now he's gonna beat up Pulte. I'll be very curious to find out what happens with Bill Pulte because this guy provided all of this evidence of stuff, and now Lisa Cook, it looks like, is exonerated, right?
Oh,
Or
not just a
she's
little exonerated, like completely. She said in the filings when she filed for the mortgage, "This is a vacation home. I am not asking for a homestead exemption." I
so
mean,
the
I think she's got a
and
case against this guy. I think
Bill
she could drag him
Pulte's
into court.
parents actually did commit mortgage fraud,
Yes,
right?
they
Is that
did.
correct?
Yes, they did.
So the irony here is incredibly rich. Bill Pulte has made an enemy out of Scott Bessent. Scott Bessent, who had his last scene fracasing with Elon Musk,
Right. I
meaning
just wanna see these guys, I wanna see these guys fight it out.
what's
Like,
funny to
that you
me
could sell
is
pay-per-view.
they said they were going to do MMA fighting at the White House. Remember that?
Yeah, why not just go all in?
Well, and
Why
maybe it's
not
already
just have these
happening.
guys,
Maybe the MMA fighting is
the
our
friends we made along the way?
right, or maybe it's just Scott Bessent beating up different people from the administration.
Sunday, 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 the kind of thrills and spills you the fans want to see and hear. It's White House Fight Club.
White House Fight Club. So, and the first rule of White House Fight Club is that Scott Bessent does invest. Scott, be the I think
Apparently, the
the
purpose of the White House Fight Club is you leak it to Axios.
right. Well, and the second rule of White House Fight Club is if you're fighting with someone who has more than 7 jobs, you're probably gonna get fired. So,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Marco has had fights with people and he's gotten their jobs. Scott
Mhm.
Bessent has had fights with people and he's gotten their jobs. So, I could see a world in which this is the end of Bill Pulte.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Bill Pulte is a guy that Donald Trump wakes up in the morning and says, "My God, what will I do without him?"
But it is interesting, like, that's just another guy, rich guy who
Sure.
Trump was friends with. I mean, the barrier to entry in this administration continues to be
Can you golf?
amazing. Right. Do I like you? Are the
Do I
vibes good?
Right. He was a developer. I know them. I am one. I love them all.
I think the real question, though, is just the idea that you have a guy who is, just sort of putting people in the cabinet. It is the one thing that I think is different from Trump 1.0 is we're not seeing like the wall of firing, which means all of these people are staying in the administration, which means
True.
talk me through that because that seems like I feel like Scott like firing your director of defense might have been a better move than keeping him in.
Well, yeah, I think Trump looked at the things that hurt him politically in the first administration and determined he was going to take that sort of Roy Cohn approach from now on. My people never do anything wrong. They're always right. Screw you. If you criticize them, you're criticizing me. And I also think there's something that's changed inside the administration is he's willing to move people laterally. Like Mike
Right.
Waltz was
Right.
national security advisor until he
Until
got
he added.
Laura Loomer when
Well,
and yeah,
didn't he also? Oh, Laura Loomer. Okay, yeah.
right.
Till he got Loomered.
And Laura Loomer fired all of his staff, and then Trump said, "Well, Marco, you can be national security advisor." But Mike Waltz didn't get humiliated. He got the United Nations job. You know, so they play it a little differently this time because Trump doesn't want to be seen as losing any battles.
But
And
Pete
so it's
Hegseth
going to take
is
a lot to fire even sec drunk Pete Hegseth.
But Pete Hegseth is still, like, adding people to Signal Chat. I mean, maybe he's not actively doing it, but clearly the problems have not gone away.
No, and look, Pete Hegseth is a singularly destructive Secretary of Defense,
Right.
and at no point uh, should the folks who are on the current Joint Chiefs of Staff ever wake up and think, I'm serving this country effectively by working for Pete Hegseth. They will not be replaced by somebody better or more responsible. They are in a deep hole with this guy because he is, I mean, without like being funny or exaggerating, Pete Hegseth is mentally incapable of doing this job. They will put somebody stupider in the job when Pete Hegseth goes.
Rick, give us, like, a reason to not despair about
Donald
the state
Trump
of
is a
American
failing
democracy.
Donald Trump is a failing president. His poll numbers suck, and they suck hard, by the way. They are bad. Donald
Right.
Trump's numbers are now in the high to mid 30s. He is not a popular president. His policies are failing almost across the board. Everything he does almost every single day is mediated by the fear of revelations on the Epstein matter.
Right, that is true.
He has been permanently branded as being a friend, associate, running buddy, however you want to describe it, of an infamous sex trafficker and an infamous pedophile. He
Right.
is talking about freeing the woman who ran the operations of that infamous sex trafficker's pedophile child trafficking ring.
Yeah.
Nothing about this is good for him.
Yeah.
Donald Trump is also now an international laughingstock, and he knows it, and
Right.
the world knows it. The tariff move has absolutely empowered China
Yeah.
more than almost any other country on earth. The United States is a laughingstock in foreign policy because no matter what Vladimir Putin does, Trump will say, "Yes, sir, 3 bags full. What can I go wash your car?"
Yeah.
So he's a terrible president. His presidency is failed and failing. He is doing awful things, but that ability to do these awful things is now diminishing with a weaker economy.
Right.
It's diminishing with an administration that is obsessed with one issue, Jeffrey Epstein behind the curtain.
Right.
And as much as he can do evil and do wrong, he's also 80 years old and he's
Right.
not in good health. And the time is ticking and the actuarial tables are undefeated. And I don't think that we should look at Trump as powerful as he would have been if he'd come back in 2021, either
Oh,
through
interesting.
reelection or
Why?
through January 6th. He's physically and mentally off his game. He's slipped.
Yeah. He seems
I mean, look,
tired.
it's going to catch up with all of us eventually, but he is not the guy he was 6 months ago. You can see it. You can feel it. And he doesn't have the same instincts and the same ability and the same power. Is the Republican Party still his bitch? Of course it is.